Helen, good to see you too.
I signed up for a writing seminar that I've gone to before for June, and I'm just, they're going to practice social distancing and whatever. But yeah, I'm a little worried, but there is so far they kind of got it under control. I'm just worried because it's in Texas.
So you're going in person.
You're going to Texas? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's Canyon, Texas. It's about 20 miles south of Amarillo. And it's at the West Texas A&M Writers Academy. And yeah, he's cutie pie. Hi. Yeah, and we just spend a week there just intensively learning how to write.
Well,
so
enjoy and be safe. Hey guys, I like to see the kids. Hooray. Okay, so we have this week's Torah portion is Ki Tisa. It's also Shabbat Parah. So there's a special section from the book of Numbers, chapter 19. It talks about the Parah Adumah, the red heifer that is part of a purification rite in anticipation for Passover. We are only 4 weeks from Passover, so it's, oh my gosh. And then this week's Torah portion is so filled with so many wonderful pieces, including that one section at the very beginning, which we just read a couple of weeks ago for Shabbat Shekalim, about taking the census. And we have, of course, the golden calf incident, which I'm not going to focus on, even though it's a very, very important section. It just, I have to save some things for next year and the year after that, right? But beyond that, it's like one of those black holes. You go to the golden calf and just sort of, you can spend forever there. And it was just the opposite. The rabbis wanted very much for us to sort of scoop by it. It was one of those embarrassing things, one of those terrible incidents that happened, which some wanted to emphasize, some wanted to hide. Some said, you know what, of all the passages in the Torah, that's the one in which traditionally you don't offer the translation of. You just read it. And so even when the old translation was in the Targum of Aramaic, that would not be one where you translate it. And for one long aliyah, you just get right through it and be done with it. So we're not doing that one today. And there's some other wonderful passages as well, including perhaps, arguably, the most significant section in the entire Torah outside the Shema and the Ve'ahavta. What would that be? That would be chapter 33 of the book of Exodus, also this week's Torah portion. Why do I say it's perhaps one of the most significant, if not the most? Because it's read 4 times a year. That passage is read this week's Torah portion. It's also read during Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, during all of the festivals. So it has incredible importance. I just love that passage. We do read it, of course, during the Chagim, and it talks about Moses, his interaction with God, and it sort of morphs into the theme that we had earlier of what exactly is revelation? What is it that we perceive when we see God? What is it that Moses saw or wanted to see? And one of the quotes that we had in the passages that we were looking at, and the commentaries that we were looking at a couple of weeks ago, included Hareina et kavodecha, let me see now your glory, which comes from this week's Torah portion. Moses wanted to see God, but I'm not going to look at that this week. I'd rather wait for one of the Chagim. Again, I've got to save some good stuff for the coming years, right? So I don't want it to go away. So here's the thing. We're going to look at chapter 31 of the book of Exodus, which has the instructions for Bitzalel in particular, the great artisan, to actually start constructing the garments and the vessels for the Ohel HaMoed, the tent of meeting, the tabernacle. And then it has the laws of, the beginning of the laws of Shabbat, in a very surprising one-word interruption of all of the descriptions for building the tabernacle and for the garments that Aaron would wear. Shabtotai tishmoru, it says. And so we're going to look at that. And then it has a very famous passage, which you are very familiar with, and we're going to look at that a little bit closer as well in this week's Torah portion. Vishamru comes from this week's Torah portion. So we've got a lot. So even though we're not doing some of the other things, don't go away. I think it's good stuff. So let's say a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe. You've sanctified us with mitzvot, and you commanded us to engage with words of Torah. So I'm going to bring up now our text. I think this is pretty large. Can you guys see this without much of a problem? How?
Yeah,
If I make it a little bit larger, is that fine?
it's good. It's okay.
How about if I go one more? How's that?
Much better.
Yeah. I'm not. I have to get a bigger screen. So anyway, this is the very beginning of chapter 31. And as you go through it, it's the kind of thing that maybe your eyes glass over when you get to and now it's with the blue and the purple and the crimson yarn and the finely twisted linen, and you make a design here and the straps are there and you interweave this, and there's these poles and there's the tent and there's the stretching and there's the dyeing, and you think, oh my God, where's the great narrative sections of the Torah? So you might look at it and go, oh, okay, I'm sort of glazing through that one. And yet something very, very important is about all of those acts of artistry, the creative work, the melachot that are instrumental or integral to the construction of the tabernacle and all of the vessels and the garments, etc. So paying attention to them, even in a little way, gives us a clue as to their great importance later on, and we'll devote some time to that at a subsequent meeting. But for now, who would like to read the very beginning of the 31st chapter?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Adonai spoke to Moses, "See, I have singled out by name, but Bezalel.
Bitzalel. Bitzalel is also the name of the great artist institute in Israel. So if you get a piece of art from the Bitzalel Institute, you got something nice.
Son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I have endowed him with the divine spirit of skill, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work every kind of craft. Moreover, I have assigned him
Oholiab,
son of Achisamach, of the tribe of Dan. And I have also granted skill to all who are skillful, that they may make everything that I have commanded you, the tent of meeting, the ark for the pact, and the cover upon it, and all the furnishings of the tent, at the table and its utensils, the pure lampstand and all its fittings, an altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, and the laver and the stand, the service vestments, the sacramental vestments of Aaron the priest, and the vestments of his sons for their service as priests, as well as the anointing oil and the aromatic incense for the sanctuary. Just as I have commanded you, they shall do.
Right. So this is the general categories of some of the work that's necessary. Of course, you can imagine, the cutting and the carving and the dyeing and the twisting and the weaving, all of these different aspects of creative work that are necessary to create, creating oil, the pressing and the sifting and the various construction necessary. So now we're going to get Rashi little comments on this, because we find that term at the very, very beginning that I've seen in verse 3, where he says, "Va'amale oto ruach Elohim," that I've filled him with the Spirit of God, b'chokhmah, with a wisdom, uvidvuna, and with discernment or insight. And so Rashi picks up on that, on chokhmah, tavuna, and de'ah. Who would like to read a little bit of Rashi?
I can.
Thank you, Kathy.
Chokhmah, wisdom, is what a person hears from others and learns and makes his own. Tvuna is understanding, is a matter by one's own intelligence, deducing it from the things one has already learned. And da'at means holy inspiration.
Right. So although it's not written tavuna, but bina, chokhmah, bina, and de'ah are found actually in our prayer book under the prayer in the Shemona Esrei for our acquisition of knowledge. Who else knows where we find that an acronym from chokhmah, bina, and de'ah? And you're all familiar with it. Arnie, what do you got?
Chabad.
Chabad, right. So Chabad drew its mission from this phrase as well. And not to say that it's exclusive in any way to their movement. Like I said, it's mentioned in our prayer book as well. So 3 times a day in our Shemona Esrei, we recite the Chokhmah, Bina, and De'ah as well. And it's an interesting discussion, which we're not going to engage in now. No. What's the difference between wisdom and understanding and knowledge? Rashi wants to say da'at as holy inspiration, but I think the understanding of da'at or knowledge is clear enough for us to understand. There are fine differences, even in English, between wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And so the fine differences between them remind us that true understanding, true wisdom, true knowledge is something that takes a great deal of time to acquire, and a wider perspective. Chizkuni focuses on who this person is, this Bitzalel, and also takes into to his focus the unusual point that usually, we have a Hebrew name. I'm Abraham ben Oezer v'Simcha. So I'm Abraham, son of Oezer or Asher and Simcha. But how often do we have not only a mention to the parent's name or the father's name, but also to the grandfather's name? Well, we do once in a while. We do so when we were referring to Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham. But Chizkuni's wondering how come we're having it here? So he has an interesting piece for that. Who would like to, Kathy, you want to continue with Chizkuni?
Betzalel, son of Uri, son of Hur. Betzalel's ancestry is given for 3 generations, whereas that of his assistant Aholiab is only traced to his father. The reason is that Betzalel's grandfather had become a martyr during the episode of the golden calf, when he tried to prevent the people from dancing around the golden calf. Seeing that the building of the tabernacle was primarily in order to facilitate atonement for the sin of the golden calf, it is appropriate that the Torah mentions Hur's name in this connection.
Good. So let's pause for a second. Why again is there a reference here by Chizkuni or any of the commentators that about they're building this, or this is in reference to the golden calf incident, when we don't even have the golden calf incident until later on in the Torah portion? Who remembers?
There's no before and after.
There we go. Very good. Hi, Janet. Hi, Mark. Good to see you. That's exactly right. And some of the other commentators are going to come out with that as well. And that can be a little disconcerting because we like the linear. It's a very left brain kind of thing. We like B follows A, C follows B, etc. And that makes sense for us. But that's not how we think. That's not even how we talk. We talk sometimes going forward, and then did I remind you what happened before that? And then we go on a total tangent, and we come back as well. And so to share a story out of chronological order, we're sort of used to that. That's not uncommon for us. And I love that passage. Again, this is from Tractate Megillah that we read, that God has planted for us the cure before the plague, before the disease, i.e. this instruction for the construction of a temple, or even of the importance of Shabbat, precedes the idolatrous actions surrounding the golden calf. So just wanted to touch base with that a little bit. Anyone have something to share on that passage? All right, I'm striking out all over the place here. Okay, Orach Chaim, who's always got something very interesting to say. His comment goes onto the next page as well. So who would like to read some Orach Chaim?
I'll read.
Okay, good, Linda, good. God bless you.
Okay. Orach Chaim. See, I have called by name Bezalel, etc. Perhaps the extra word Beshem is intended to draw our attention not only to Bezalel's name, but also to that of his father and grandfather, and how those names reflected Bezalel's impact on his contemporaries. The name Betzel suggests that he was the man through whom a shelter was provided for God on earth.
Right, Etzal is shadow, so or some protective agent, and so the Betzel El, his name sort of is like shelter of God or the shadow of God. Who's next? Go ahead, Linda, if you continue. This is still Orach Chaim.
Okay. Ben Uri suggests that Bezalel's father looked upon God as the source of his inspiration and enlightenment.
Again, or is light. So
Right.
he's the son of light, or in God's light.
That's my daughter's Hebrew name,
See?
or part of it anyway. Ben Hur is a reference to freedom. Ben Hurim, Bezalel helped free the Israelites from the remaining stigma of the golden calf by helping Israel to regain its good graces. Our sages in Shemot Rabbah, in connection with the words Mishkan HaEdut in Exodus, point out that the reason for that designation of the tabernacle was that its existence was testimony, Edut, that God had forgiven the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. This very thought was also anchored in Bezalel's name and the name of his forebears. The allusions we just referred to would justify the conjunctive letter Vav in front of the words, and I will fill him with a spirit of wisdom.
Right.
This may also be...
Go ahead.
Okay. This may also be the reason that the Torah speaks of Bechoma instead of simply Chokmah when describing God's input as additional to Bezalel's natural talents and virtues. Alternatively, the word Bechokmah may reflect a statement of our sages in Baruchot based on Daniel, that God adds additional wisdom to people already possessed of a measure of wisdom. Accordingly, the words Va'amalei Bechokmah mean, and I will add wisdom to Bezalel, who already possesses wisdom.
So they're taking a lot of time focusing on Bezalel and the importance of his role. do you think it's they're going overboard, or this is something? Why do you think they're taking this much time to parse his name and his ancestry and the specifics of his inspiration? Go ahead, Margie, please.
Because he has done the work to turn the page on the new opportunity that Israel has. I can't remember from that first that we read, though, who was a martyr of the Golden Calf?
His grandfather. So we're going to get to that in future years. But if you read it later on, the Golden Calf, there was a full-fledged civil war. Moses came down and was very, very hot, and he took the building of the Golden Calf, even though it was his brother Aaron who was instrumental in it. The rabbis tried to cover up Aaron's role, saying, "Oh, he tried to delay, and he did his best to convince the people otherwise." Okay, well, that's a way of looking at it. Other way is Aaron was complicit, right? Regardless, Moses took this as a challenge to the whole covenant that we had and the whole enterprise of establishing this nation. So he basically uttered the phrase, "If you're not with us, you are against us." And I believe that was first uttered in the French Revolution, and certainly it was uttered then later on in the Russian Revolution of 1917 and 1914 on. And it was a phrase that we still hear, that if you're not with us, you're against us. Well, Moses said, brought all of the Levitical tribe together, all of his Levites, and they armed. And he said, anyone else who wants to join us, because if you're not with us, you're against us. And there was a bloody massacre. It was really harsh, which is another reason I just wasn't in the mood to get into that this week. So sorry. We've gone through too much. I wanted something happier like Bishamru. And so we're doing that. But it was an ugly and bloody piece. And we might think of, the Levitical tribe, they were the Levites, and from them came the Kohanim. These are the religious people. Well, they apparently were some warrior toughs, and they went through the camp, and there was terrible bloodshed. And of course, people fight back, and it was said that some joined the Levites in this, the tribe of Judah, for instance, and his grandfather was one who died. So
it's hard for me to think of Levites with weapons. It's just not something I've ever really even thought about before. And so if he was a martyr, then he was on Moses's side.
Right. Exactly. There's some wonderful examinations of this. Michael Walzer did it with called the Revolution of Exodus. Other philosophers and historians, biblical critics have looked at it in some close detail. Again, if we're going to get into it, we'd have to really get into it. But just know that it was not happy. And I think what Michael Walzer has as his point was that in every revolution there is a counter revolution, and so there's violence. You don't upset a status quo without people getting hurt, and at least he didn't identify any. And we can just look at our modern history and our own American Revolution, which wasn't just us against the English. It was American versus American, followed just 100 years later, less than 100 years later, by our own Civil War, which was in some ways a counter-revolution. The French Revolution, for goodness sakes, people think, oh, well, they chopped off Marie Antoinette's head, and that was it. No. A revolution, counter-revolution, royal pretenders, fights among the royals, between the Catholics and the Huguenots. I mean, for goodness sakes, it went on for a long time. I think you could arguably say that it wasn't until the 1900s in which you finally had some semblance of a post-revolution with the French. And if you want to get into Cromwell in England as well, revolution, counter-revolution. So when we look at this Torah portion, don't be surprised that there are those who are, again, just a bit away from the time as slaves, and they're trying to figure out their way through a wilderness. And this old man's up on the mountain too long. It got pretty sharp.
Okay.
But Arnie.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad that we really haven't learned anything since then. You know what I'm saying? That's what bothers me, is that, you know, maybe it's describing human behavior. I mean, think about you know, concept of military or killing people in the name of. Somehow that is a justification. I mean, the average jihadist follows that rule exactly.
Right.
So I mean, it's disappointing, I guess, but I guess the Bible kind of, or Torah kind of teaches us this is nothing new, and maybe learn from that stuff.
Right.
But how long has it been now? 3,000 years? We haven't learned. We haven't learned a lot.
And you know, you've heard me say it a number of times. I think the Torah is one of its sacred blessings is that it provides a very clear mirror that reflects back human potential and human foibles, our great ability to learn and to grow, but also our selfishness, our ego, our violence, and it reflects all of that right back to us. So regardless of the age, we can look at that and look at these Israelites and go, ooh, I see myself. Mark, I know you had something to share. Go.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes, sir.
Do you think there's anything that has to do with what the people were stealing from the Egyptians? Stealing is not the term used in the Torah, I know. But do you think it reminds me of like either the Watts riots or the New York mafia Don conflicts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good, if you want to, I don't want to say mafia is a great analogy, but it's tribal, right? And so
Yes.
in a tribal, I can say, okay, well, we're all Americans here. Well, sorta. I mean, that's a big identification. And our tendency, I think, is to break ourselves down into smaller tribal units. And you see this, I know it seems a little bit too far-fetched, but if you think about it, our predilection for selecting baseball, football, basketball teams to root for and to wear their uniforms and to cheer them on. And you guys know, if you've ever been to a ball game, people get really upset. I mean, really upset. I mean, they take it personally when there was a bad call and we got robbed. And so there's something about us, and Mark, that maybe this was your point. There's something about, or maybe it was Arnie who said it, that the hard drive in a human being to divide into us versus them. And I've been speaking a little bit. I'm almost through with Rabbi Lord Sacks's book on morality, his last work, and that's one of his points, that we, in identifying closer and closer with our own particular tribe, it's the I versus everyone else, as opposed to the more generous we, in which I don't look at Americans divided into class, race, gender, religion, region, political party, etc., but Americans. And so there's something about us that may be in our DNA that makes us quite prone to tribalism.
Especially like in my generation, the Jews that came over, the generation, my father's generation more than his father's, were really tribal people. You know, they had landsmen. Somebody brought you over here that sponsored you, and then so you were dedicated to that person or group.
Well, I think you're 100% correct, because how the shuls were, the Litvaker shul, the Russische shul, the Germanische shul. I mean, you divided up, which country you came from. And in Denver, who's a Denverite? Who grew up in Denver? We have no Denverites here. Okay. Well, if you talk to a Denverite, what's the big thing that they divide themselves of? Denver
East side,
Jewish
west
community.
side.
Yeah, east side, west side. They go on and on about the east side, west side. I'm thinking, it's all Denver. No one lives there anymore. So who cares, east side, west side? Go ahead, Arnie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a course that's talking about social networking and the impact of the social networking. One of the points they raise is exactly what you're describing. But now with the internet, you can find your birds of a feather. I don't care what it is. I mean, you want to worship your left foot, get on the internet. You'll find a group that does that. And that's even going to force more and more division. Because at least in the old days, it took a while to find other people. You suppress some to get things that were wider that you could, but now anything you want. And that's the whole point of the course, is that that's the impact. Now, how do we get out of it? Comes in later lectures, I hope.
Yeah, that's very, very good. Who else was? Because I want to get back to our Torah portion, because we're not talking about any of this right now.
Well, Rabbi, I read an article because I'm still trying to figure out QAnon and why, and it's boils down to community that people want to belong, where we don't like being alone, and so they bond with the first person they see, kind of like a bird, and so it's just we've seen that with gangs, and some families are really tight, and even if you marry somebody, you're still not part of that family. You're not privy to mom's recipes and the in jokes. There's just it's like that, and it's just because we need to be part of something, a group. We need acceptance, and it could be why some of these groups have so many people in them that they just won't listen to anything but what the leader says. So
good. Please, Janet.
I think that's one of the frustrations that, synagogues are having, organizations are having, is that we used to think that when people went to look for their group, they'd find their group in Hadassah, in B'nai B'rith, at the synagogue, in those places. And for whatever reason, there's been a shift in our culture and our society away from finding the group kind of more abstractly to individualized. And I doubt it's the only time in history that it's happened, but with communication the way it is, it certainly makes it easier, because you can find QAnon and you can find all your pals on that, or you can find something else. So just a thought.
No, I think that's a very good thought. And I'm curious to see, and we won't know for at least a couple of years, the ultimate social impact on us from this separation. I think absolutely you're correct. We've witnessed it. The diminishing of the role of the social bonds and everything from B'nai B'rith and Hadassah and the youth groups and synagogues still have their thing, but it's different, right? And even the chavarot. All of them had been diminishing, or the chavarot are tending to be older. We just had a chavara meeting. It was huge. I think coming out of this time, people may very well say, you know what, I've looked into that pit of loneliness, of isolation, of only connecting by this electronic, and I want something more. And so, but maybe that's just temporary. Maybe that'll be significant. We'll find out. All right. Who wants to get back to the Torah portion?
Well, I was going to say that Havara, that group, becomes a group, then there's another group, and sometimes they don't even mix together. You see that at after service on Shabbat, you go to some temples, synagogues, there's a group of people here, a group of people over here. And if you're new to the temple, it's hard to get to know.
No, that's it. Alan, you're right. That's a challenge that we all face, especially those of us who moved to a new community, right? If you grew up already in that community and your extended family and your friends are already there, their dance card's full. They they're not looking for more people to have over for dinner. I mean, they're pretty full. And so on some of it, I understand that there's a saturation point socially for those people who are in a community. And so that then is our challenge as synagogue leaders and as people who are new to say, okay, I don't have to butt into your group. We can be friends, but I know that we're not going to be close socially interacting. But so what's my next alternative? And so to build new. So let me get to this passage, because this was just the preamble. Right. I wanted to get to, I'm going to skip this piece right here. The section here, because right after this whole idea of build the tabernacle, build these vessels, build this garment, then it says, V'yamar Adonai el Moshe lemor. Now that I've bolded here lemor twice. And Adonai said to Moses, literally saying, right? Although the translation doesn't repeat it, it should. Then it says, Ata daber el bnei Yisrael lemor. So the lemor is repeated twice. And then look at that next word right after lemor. And I'm going to make it even larger here, if you can see it. This happens to be one of the most significant words in the entire Torah. It's ach, right? A perfectly Yiddish term, ach. No, it means however, it means but, it means and yet, right? So it says you're telling the children of Israel about all of the things they need to do in order to build the tabernacle and the garments. Ach, et shabtotai tishmoru. But my Sabbaths you must observe. You must keep throughout all the generations. That single word here, this however, is the key to all of the halakha for the laws of keeping a Shabbat. And it all it hinges on these two letters right here. And look what it says, keep my Sabbaths, for this is the sign. Now we know this this word, the ot beini b'nei Yisrael, that this is a sign for me and between all of you and throughout all the generations. For I am the Lord your God who has consecrated. I've made you holy. A sign. The Sabbath itself is a sign, which is why, by the way, we don't put on tefillin on Shabbat, because the tefillin are an ot. They're also a sign. And I don't need to wear an ot on Shabbat or the Yom Tov, because that day is already a Yom Tov. So here's from one passage from Talmud, Beitza 16a. Arnie, you're my Talmud man. You want to read this?
Yeah, I got it. There we go. All right, you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Mara raises an objection to this. Isn't it written, nevertheless, you must keep my Shabbatot? For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you, which the sages expounded as follows. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, Moses, I have a good gift in my treasury, and its name is Shabbat, and I wish to give it to the Jewish people. Go and inform them of this intention of mine. And from here, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, one who gives a gift of a piece of bread to a child must inform his mother of his actions, so that the child's parents will be aware of the giver's fond feelings for them, thereby enhancing friendly relations and companionship among Jews. This appears to be in direct contradiction to Rabbi Chama's statement.
Yeah, I just thought that, and then that makes reference to an earlier part in the Gemara, which I don't want to get into right now. I thought it was an interesting concept.
Arnie, you should do audio books, or Arnie. I could listen to you all day.
So Arnie, continue on. This is from another passage in Yoma.
Other Tanaim debated the same issue. Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, says that it is stated, but keep my Shabbatot. One might have thought that this applies to everyone in all circumstances. Therefore, the verse states, but, a term that restricts and qualifies. It implies that there are circumstances where one must keep Shabbat and circumstances where one must desecrate it to save a life. Rabbi Yonatan ben Yosef says that it is stated, for it is sacred to you. This implies that Shabbat is given into your hands and you are not given it to die on account of Shabbat.
Right. So in this passage, the ach is the limit, i.e. observe my Shabbat, but pekuach nefesh, to save a life, you can violate Shabbat. And that's, of course, then codified in Jewish law. But there's another understanding of it as well. So I wanted to get to with the malachot. Yeah, right here. So who would like to read a little Cheskuni?
I can.
Oh, please.
Rabbi Cheskuni ben Manoach, but you must observe my Sabbath days. The reason why the Torah repeats this instruction was to tell us that this applies not only during the period when the tabernacle was being constructed, but for all future generations. This is the origin of which type of work is forbidden to be performed on the Sabbath. Any type of work which was performed during the construction of the tabernacle, that is what, for example, was required to be performed in the construction of the tabernacle or service in the tabernacle, was henceforth forbidden to be performed on the Sabbath.
Perfect. And we have this amplified. And would you go ahead, Lori? And this is Or HaChaim, a little bit a couple centuries later, who continued that understanding, the development of the 39 malachot. They identified 39 creative acts necessary to build the tabernacle and the garments for the priests. And those 39 categories of creative work then became the categories of forbidden labor on Shabbat. So when it says observe Shabbat, do not work on Shabbat, it specifically linked that then to the construction, to the work necessary for the construction of the temple. If you would, please.
You want me to start by understanding?
Let us first examine.
Let us first examine the word
Ach.
By understanding the significance of that word, we will arrive at a clearer understanding of why the Torah wrote the word lemor twice, as well as the other details we queried at the beginning of this paragraph. Our sages in the Talmud, Shabbat 129, state that it is permitted to violate the Sabbath legislation for the sake of a sick person if the sick person's life would be endangered unless the Sabbath were violated for his sake. Any situation in which a life is at stake overrides the Sabbath prohibitions. This is what the Torah hinted at when it introduced this piece of legislation with the restrictive word ach. However, excuse me.
That's right.
The word simply means that situations may arise which override the legislation about to be recorded. The meaning of the plural is that any day which is also described as Shabbat in the Torah, such as the Day of Atonement or the other festivals, falls into the same category when it comes to the principles permitting violation of the Sabbath or even demanding violation of the Sabbath. It also means that for the sake of such sick people, one may violate more than one Sabbath if the patient has not recovered in the interval. A further ruling derived from the above wording is the case of a patient who requires 8 days consecutive treatment. One should not delay commencement of such treatment in order to violate only a single Sabbath, but one has to commence treatment of the patient at once, even if this involves the violation of 2 Sabbath days.
Right. So these makel, or these leniencies, are essential because, as we're going to read in a bit, and you are probably familiar already from the time when we've read through Torah, the penalty for violating the Torah is it's a capital punishment, and so they go to great lengths to say, even so, even so, the do not delay in any way our requirement, our need to take care of one another during our times of illness. So here's the passage from the Torah itself. You shall keep the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. He who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does work on it, that person shall be cut off among his kin. And so now there's one thing to be put to death, and it's the other to be cut off. So we'll look at that for just a second. To be put to death was for those who mechalecha, who profanes it, who literally turns it on its head, who turns what was holy into not just a common day, but it turns it into something that was disgusting. And the alternative then is a person who actually simply does work. And notice the Hebrew word for work that is used is malacha, not avodah. Avodah is a simple work, the physical act of work equals force times distance, but whatever it takes to lift up an object or move it to one place or the other. Malacha is creative work, and that's what is being referred to here. And it says that a person who violates that will have karet, which is a whole different sense of punishment, in that they will be spiritually cut off from their people. And it's still obviously quite harsh, but the idea was, if you don't observe a Shabbat, if you're not a part of sanctifying time, spiritually you're going to be dead inside. You're going to be like a slave, like a robot, an automaton. You're not going to be a living, caring, soulful person, because you are so devoted to work, to making a living, to these other pursuits. 6 days of work may be done, but on the seventh day there should be Sabbath of complete rest, holy unto Adonai. Then it repeats it. Whoever does work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. So I've got two passages. Yeah, I got two passages, from one from Mishnah and then from the Talmud, from the Gemara. Go ahead.
Yeah, I look at it in a much different way. I look at that you work for 6 days and you don't work on Shabbat, because I think they know human nature, that if you were wealthy and had a crew of people working for you, you might work them for 7 days a week. And this gives them the 1 day off by law.
Right. Very, very good. Yes. Arnie, please.
I have a question, which maybe somebody in their own reading and background either correct me or not. You know, people have referred to Shabbat as the greatest gift from the Jews, the idea of a day of rest. Is that true? I mean, anybody who knows kind of history of societies,
Right.
First time that a day of rest was mandated?
Well, let's put it this way: in Hellenistic literature, in the great work of Menachem Stern, put together of Greek and Latin authors on Jews and Judaism, it's a multi-volume work. He identifies all the places in which the Sabbath is mentioned by Greek and Latin authors. In almost all the cases, it is as a pejorative, that it shows our laziness, that how could they be so unproductive as to refuse to work 1 out of 7 days, right? Some said it was just steeped in superstition. So they were quite harsh about the observance of the Sabbath. In time, of course, Judaism won out on that debate because the peoples of the Greek mainland and throughout the Roman Empire certainly adopted the Sabbath, if not as our Sabbath, eventually through the Christians' Sunday. Margie, go ahead. You have to unmute though. Margie. Margie, we missed your comment. You have to Margie, you're muted again.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Is the Sabbath more important than the tabernacle? That's the message I'm getting.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And yes, we can sanctify a place, and that is more universal, that there are sacred places. The idea that there's a sacredness in time, that's unique. And for the Torah to say, as important as, and we're going to get this in the Talmud in a little bit, as important as it is for you to build the tabernacle, stop building the tabernacle once a week. Now, on the Saturday, on Shabbos, stop it, right? Because more important than even building a sacred space is your celebration of the sacredness of time. Because at the end of it, and we're all of the age now, it becomes more and more acute to us, time's all we got. You know, I can accumulate all kinds of shtus, right? I can have money in the bank. I can have cars and homes. I can have jewels and everything else. None of it means a thing if I don't have time, right? And to sanctify time, that was absolutely our gift. Mark, go ahead, please.
I met some Orthodox Jewish kids who were sent here by their parents from New York from yeshiva. They were Syrian Jews and weren't Sabbath observant when they lived in Syria. When they moved here, they became Sabbath observant because they found out they made more money when they closed 1 day a week. And that was how they determined how important it was.
That's very good. Very good. Let's get to this passage first from the Mishnah of Makot and then the Gemara. Who would like to read from the Mishnah?
I will.
Please. Thank you, Margie.
The mitzvah to establish a Sanhedrin with the authority to administer capital punishments is in effect both in Eretz Yisrael and outside Eretz Yisrael. A Sanhedrin that executes a transgressor once in 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal, since the Sanhedrin would subject the testimony to exacting scrutiny. It was extremely rare for a defendant to be executed. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says this categorization applies to a Sanhedrin that executes a transgressor once in 70 years. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva say, if we had been members of the Sanhedrin, we would have concluded trials in a manner whereby no person would have ever been executed. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, in adopting that approach, they too would increase the number of murderers among the Jewish people. The death penalty would lose its deterrent value as all potential murderers
would know that no one else ever executed. So there's a debate that they're having. But the key was here in the Torah, it says, well, we'll put you to death for this, we'll put you to death for that. But the capital punishment was always one that had to go to the Sanhedrin, obviously there was an appeals process, and there was a very stringent process. In the tractate Makot, you had to have not one, you had to have 2 witnesses, not just witnesses that were hearsay, they had to be eyewitnesses. And those 2 eyewitnesses had to say to the person, behold, stop what you're about to do. Do you not know that what you're about to do could result in a capital punishment, that this is punishable perhaps even by death? And the person says, I think I do know that. And he says, well, then you shouldn't do it. You can be punished by death. And he says, I now understand that I can be punished by death, but I'm going to do it anyway in brazen violation of the Torah. So that never happens, right? We don't have 2 witnesses like that. We don't have the exchange like that. That's why Kiva says you can't do it. But Raman Gamliel said that, yeah, if we don't, it loses its impact as a preventative. So here's the Gemara on that. So Margie, where it says the Mishnah teaches.
The Mishnah teaches a Sanhedrin that executes once in 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says this categorization applies to a Sanhedrin that executes once in 70 years. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Is Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah saying that a Sanhedrin that executes once in 70 rather than in 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal? Or perhaps he is saying that the standard conduct is for a Sanhedrin to execute once in 70 years, and only if it executes more than one person during that period is it characterized as destructive. The Gemara concludes, the dilemma shall stand unresolved.
That is one of that passage. Why this is, especially for you, Arnie, because you're reading Torah. You see, I highlighted this word, teku. It's an important concept in Gemara. Simply says, we don't know. It'll be resolved in the future generations, which is really cool because the Talmud's not a law code. You don't go back to the Talmud and just say, okay, now we know exactly what to do. It understands that some issues are going to be unresolved and we'll have to wait for future generations. Arnie, go ahead.
Yeah, what's interesting is we are the future generations. Now, here, I guess they didn't have prisons back then because they're talking about the result of the trial. Okay, now we don't talk anymore about the result of the trial. We're talking punishment. So we're not quite where they're talking about yet.
Yeah, but they did have prisons and they had pits. And they had a war. We have the terminology for it, but they also had executions. We used to execute an awful lot of people in this country, and then for a while we weren't. And then there are certain states that just are doing it left and right, and it's upsetting. It's almost a cavalier treatment of human life. Even if I'm not one who would say never have capital punishment. But it seems like they are certainly abusing that system. Anyway, so this goes on as well. I wanted to get to this last little piece here because you guys have to sing it with me. This is where we have Vishamru. It's a part of the Kiddushat Hayom, the sanctification of the day. We sing this on Shabbat. And so here's the passage from the Torah where we get it. That's why it's such a significant section to recite. We recite it not only on Shabbat in the service, but also it's traditional to recite Vishamru on Shabbat morning when I'm doing Kiddush. So Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat lasot et HaShabbat lidorotam barit olam. And I skip the repetition. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael ot hi le'olam ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashemayim ve'et haaretz uveyom hashvi'i Shabbat v'yinafash. On that seventh day you shall rest. So let's read together in English. The Israelite people shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout the ages as a covenant for all time, a brit. It shall be a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he ceased from work and was refreshed. So a wonderful passage from Orach Chaim. Who hasn't read yet for us? Natalie, what do you think?
There's a lot of Hebrew in there.
No, just okay. I'll do that. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat. I'll do the Hebrew. You do the English.
Okay. The children of Israel shall observe the Sabbath, etc. Why did the Torah add another observance? Besides, why does the Torah use the verb la'asot, to do, which expresses an activity when the meaning seems to be that the children of Israel are to observe the Sabbath by abstaining from a number of activities?
Our sages have pursued their own path in explaining this wording. Perhaps the Torah employs the word vishamru to teach the authorities to surround the basic Sabbath legislation
With a sayag, a fence.
Or a framework, which is designed to prevent a person from not knowing which day is the Sabbath. The words
La'asot et HaShabbat.
would mean some action designed to ensure that we know which day is the Sabbath. It is to avoid situations where one recites Kiddush when the day in question is not the real Sabbath, such as the examples we mentioned when discussing the last verse.
Okay, so now I've got a whole bunch more. He goes to town on this whole idea, and when he says that the sages have all kinds of different reasons why we have it, la'asot, why he's right. He's going to bring paragraph after paragraph, so we won't have time for that. But the idea that I wanted to bring is this idea of machen Shabbos, to make a Shabbos, la'asot et Shabbat, to do something. And so, Jerry, you're right. It is a day of abstaining, of not working, and that's to the foreman, to the boss, to the employer, to give the workers a day off. But even so, it's not just a day. It's not enough just to sit passively. To be able to do something, and it could be lighting the candles, a bracha over the bread. But we say bracha over the bread all the time. To say a special kiddush, which is not just the Pri Hagofen, i.e. the blessing for wine, but it's also a sanctification of this time. It's a time for study. And so many of you have joined us when we were in the minyan, either on Friday night or on Shabbat morning, and participating in helping to lead a service, or being a part of a Torah study discussion, or seeing some friends and doing something active to set this day apart from the others, to acknowledge the sanctity of time, not just for birthdays, not just for anniversaries, but every week to say, you know what, I'm going to do something very special for Shabbos, la'asot, to an active participation. So the counterpoint to that, and Linda, I want to get to you, is that what did our ancestors do? They made a golden calf, right? They wanted to create not just sacred space, they wanted to make a sacred thing. And God said, don't make anything. No thing, no space is as holy as time. So don't be driven to make a sacred calf. That's idolatry. Make for yourself instead the opportunity for sacred time. Linda, please.
I was just going to make a comment that's not related to Torah, but as you recall, I was sitting outside enjoying this beautiful day on my deck, and my computer got so hot from the sun that it kicked off. So I had to come inside. And it wasn't very long ago, on a cold winter day, I was inside sitting in front of a space heater, and the same thing happened. So my laptop is very sensitive to heat. But it is a gorgeous day out there.
Well, then keep it out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Very, very good. So anyway, I thought the idea that our ancestors, I mean, there was some editor who decided that we had to have this section about Shabbat brought right before the paragraphs, the chapter on the golden calf, and it's an important placement that I thought brings something to us. We have realized, I think now more than ever, that we can connect with Torah and with each other. Yes, in our homes, on our porches, even when it gets too hot. We can do it on our computers, And we can do it in our sanctuaries. We can do it in our cars. I've had people Zoom while they're driving, which is not probably the safest thing. And yet you do it, right? And it sort of makes me seasick. I'm trying to like, oh, I can't watch this person. They're going like this, right? I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. There are people who have their cell phone and they're walking like this from room to room. I'm not a seasick kind of person, but oh my God. But okay. But at the very least, we know that they are feeling comfortable connecting with Torah and with each other on the move wherever they are. So every place is a potential for a sacred space.
In this town, you have to.
That's something special.
In Denver, you have to pray when you're driving.
Yeah. Very good. Very, very good. Hey,
Rabbi, yesterday on the news, they were showing this doctor was Zooming his court appearance for a traffic ticket during surgery.
Oh.
And the judge said, I am not comfortable with this. You're going to have to come back next week.
Yeah, there's some things you don't want multitasked. Surgery is one of them. Hey, real quick for everybody. I know there's lots of different programs out there for everyone. There's a free Edain Reichel concert. University of Colorado Hillel is putting on. Edain Reichel is like he's like the Bruce Springsteen of Israel. Great musician. Anyway, it's a free concert that the kids are putting on. So if you want to tune into that, lots of other things. On Wednesday night, there's a lifelong Jewish learning, which I hope everyone will tune into. It's with our Temple Sinai members. It's Jews of color and their experiences. And so we have some of our friends who are Jews of color and will be sharing. I think it's Sam Howard and D'Angelo Smith and Dawn Nakamura Kessler. And so marvelous different perspectives. And that's going to be on Wednesday night for the Lifelong Jewish Learning. Lots of really important things that are out there. So I hope to see you online, either studying with me or as we both learn from others. And if you have anything going on that you want us to be aware of, please don't hesitate to give me a ring. Yoni, thank you for putting on the docket everything as well. By the way, anybody watched the Cells program yesterday with Brett Stevens? Am I the only one? It was an amazing passage. Pardon?
What program was it?
It was on the Cell. It was on domestic terrorism on the right, and had Paul Bergola and Carl Rove and Brett Stevens. I'll see if we can offer that again as well. Anyway, oh yes, as Rabbi Yoni is mentioning, Rabbi Yoni, sorry, that's your daddy, Rabbi Buckman. Rabbi Coleman has her class tonight as well for women's study. That's awesome. Otherwise, this Friday night, we have our confirmation service. So we're going to have a bunch of confirmation of the families in, but in a couple more weeks, we're going to allow people in for Friday night services and Shabbat morning. So don't forget, you have to register each time you want to go to services, that write or call Lauren Bubis and say, hey, I'd like to come in. How many people? You have to have your temperature and that kind of thing. But it'll be wonderful to be able to see you when you're comfortable and when you're safe. Get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated. How's that? All right, Rabbi Yoni. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, Rabbi.